All right, so let's go ahead and go to the next thing here. All right, so basically, what we're going to talk about is the Department of State, Government, and Federal Affairs. Basically, um, just in case you missed it or didn't understand, most of these people have traveled the world, walked most of it, drove most of it, and well, they've gotten as far as they could get in sea bound. So basically, what you need to know is um, there's a way of understanding the government, and the actual, basically the state. So, here's the situation that we have going here. The government is actually the president and the Congress. Uh, the federal is where there's military. Also, they're also government as well. But what you need to know about all of this is that each one is broken down into specific categories. And basically, what you need to know is that the Department of State has its own set of rules. Basically, they still have to follow the federal and government bodies. Basically, that's what the governor and the lieutenant governor does. They're governors and lieutenant governors of all of the governing bodies. Basically, follow the president and Congress. Basically, the Senate as well. And this is what you needed to know as far as getting yourself into a situation to where you need government help. That's where it is. Most people don't know about all of that, but that's what those categories are. And in certain situations, the federal, well, are still the same. Basically, the federal government, well, basically, they are here as the military. Every officer in the United States military follow the federal guidelines, basically, and of the government, and it goes from there. Each one follow the United States provisions, prohibitions, which are it's really hard because it's not supposed to be like that. Basically, they have to follow the federal guidelines, so it makes it hard to say. Go ahead and leave the prohibition part out. So, the federal guidelines do exactly that. They follow all of what is said by all the governing bodies, and anyone that's not in the government, basically they just don't have the right to change the system, because if they do change the system, they won't understand what is actually being done in the United States. So basically, the federal officers and Federal Reserve Bank, basically that's where all the federal money goes. And then you have the enlisted reserve pay, which is still the same. It's still in the Social Security, and if you go through the Social Security, you'll be able to get this money. So this is what I wanted you to do as far as that poor guy. As far as anything goes, is the federal bank operates that way. It operates only for the federal. And as I said before, they follow the federal guidelines, and then they go from there. As I said before, the federal officers are always paid just like the enlisted is paid. through their actual um, fee or pay grade. Now, let's discuss the pay grade as far as federal is concerned. The actual pay grade is basically a situation where you don't have time to actually discover. Well, give me a moment. The federal pay grade is actually set by the lieutenant colonel of the United States military, and basically, for some reason, the pay grade had been broken down. So what we did was we set a situation to where each person's letter, um, basically each person's pay is set in a certain type of way. So there's a situation to where basically you have the opportunity to get your pay as you become active or as you become in reserve. Now, reserve, as I said before in a previous video, reserve basically does not mean to have it later. So basically, the reserve is supposed to be active. You're supposed to be able to get all of this money from the reserve, from the Social Security Administration. So I wanted to show you about the the dollar. Uh, there's a lot of hecklers. Give me a moment. So I wanted to show you that each note from the Federal Reserve actually has a type of number on it. Well, that's 20. And what you need to know is the following. Once the money has been made, uh, once the money has been made under the federal guidelines, basically the Federal Reserve puts itself in a situation to where it can do the following things. Burns actually burns the money that's no longer needed, and basically the the money that's in the Federal Reserve had already sent out all the money that's necessary to be sent out, and well, in this part of the town. So basically, there is a situation to where a lot of people thought that the Federal Reserve had closed. The Federal Reserve does not close. Its mission and guidelines is to burn any money that's no longer needed, or which is basically any bill that is counterfeit. So that's basically what they're supposed to be doing. Now, here's another bit of thing about the actual reserve and the Federal Reserve, not the note, but the Federal Reserve that goes to the military. Basically, all of that money actually comes from the actual pay that was supposed to have been given to them. So here's what a lot of people thought, that this actually comes from the city. It actually comes from the federal government. And a lot of people had a situation to where they didn't know where this money was going to come from or where it was going to be collected. So basically, that's about all that I can tell you. The United States tax was designed to gather money for the city, and that's about it. So I have no idea what they were trying to do. It's leave the military out of this situation. So what happened was the military had to take jobs that were civil. Um, so I hope that everyone is doing well under the federal guidelines. The civil service moved to a situation to where reserve is now civil service. So the jobs are supposed to be qualified under those certain situations. So that is about all that I can tell you about that particular situation. The Federal Reserve still has a situation where they have to still pay the military for their service. Um, well, let's discuss that situation. As I said before, the money that from the actual pay actually comes from the actual Federal Reserve. There's no other way to do that. So that's about it. But here's the basic thing that you need to worry about. Well, there is an actual part on the actual check where anything federal goes directly to Federal Reserve and not the actual Federal Reserve where it has to sit, but the actual federal money that goes there is an actual tax. So that tax pays the actual federal government. So that's where that money goes. Basically, it's what you needed to know as part as the W-2. Basically, all of this information is all given to you under the federal guidelines, basically of the check itself. So then there is an actual second area where basically um, the actual, let's see, the next thing that you need to be worried about is the actual, let's see, state tax. Basically, Texas has decided on its own state tax that it should be zero because all of the tax that goes from the people, property, and uh, businesses and companies all go directly as a tax to the city itself. So that's where it collects its money. This is all a bit of information that I can provide for you. I basically hope you're able to understand this bit of information. This is public management, and basically, I hope you're able to have a great day. Goodbye.